and welcome back to Fantasy Nuts UK, a late night fantasy football show here on YouTube. And I am delighted to be joined tonight by the JTT Cup founder, commissioner, a New York Jets fan previously for his sins, maybe, but it's all going all right this year. And gin enthusiast, if there was a better word to mean he loves it more than even an enthusiast, then I'd use that. Matt, what is going on, mate?
How you doing, mate? I'm good. Really excited to be on and chat football. And thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's great to have you on, mate. Firstly, I ask everybody this: how have you been getting on in your leagues this year?
To be honest, not great. I've fallen into a trap where I feel like I'm in too many, and I can't pay enough attention to each of them. Charity leagues, I'm doing terribly. I'm not going to qualify in the JTT, which is obviously my own league. Although I don't mind that, to be fair, because that would look dodgy if I won. I'm doing all right in Scott Fishbowl. I started 12-2, but I've gone 0-4 the last 2 weeks, as there's a league median in that. Home league, I should be contending, but I'm 4-5. I've got a stacked roster on paper, but I've got Stafford, Kamara, Taylor, Keenan Allen, all people who have not been up to expectations this year. So, yeah, overall pretty poorly, really.
Yeah, injuries and players just getting off to an awful start has really been the main sort of takeaway from this year, I think, for a lot of people.
Yeah.
But let's make you happy now. The Jets, they're doing fantastic. What is different between this season and previously?
I mean, it's almost where do you start? Nearly everything is different. First and foremost, being a Jets fan, obviously, it's enjoyable again. It's been 10 years since we even got to the playoffs. I think I can remember one winning season under Todd Bowles where we missed the playoffs in the last game of the season. This year's been great. You know, the run game massively improved. We've made some good decisions. Obviously, losing Breece Hall was a sickener, but James Robinson started really well. It's quite clear that the draft class from this year is pretty much, we've nearly hit on every player. The O-line hasn't been as bad as we thought, despite injuries. Garrett Wilson's playing out of his skin, and so is Sauce. So, still on the fence. I'm still on the fence about Zach, but we're 6-3. We've got a huge game against the Patriots after the bye. We must win that because we need to keep the tiebreaker with the Patriots at least at 500. Obviously, after losing to them at home. So, we'll see. I still have us just missing the playoffs, if I'm honest, because our second half schedule is not easy. We've got the Vikings, the Seahawks, we've got to play the Bills and the Dolphins again. We've got to play the Bears, and I'm not sure about them because Justin Fields has been awesome the last couple of weeks. So we'll see. I think I've got us down at 10 wins and just missing. If we make it, then great. But it'll be interesting to see if we get healthy next year, what we can do.
I mean, it has this. Both New York teams have been a breath of fresh air this year, really. Elijah Vera Tucker has been outstanding. He had a good rookie year, but he's been brilliant. He's obviously gone down as well. James Robinson's a marvelous addition, I think. With obviously Breece going down, which was tragic, but
yeah,
it all stems from Zach Wilson, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think so. Someone asked me on Twitter earlier in the week, how do I feel about Zach? Because I really did not feel good about Zach after we lost to the Patriots. And I was probably more scathing than most. So someone asked me after we won this week against the Bills, how do I feel about him? And the easiest way I can describe it is he can win us games by not losing us games. So when he plays mistake free, he's not going to throw for 450 yards and win a game. But he'll play mistake free, and the D and the special teams, the run game is then carrying. We're winning in all phases. Against the Bills, we won in all phases. Wilson was better than Allen, even though he wasn't amazing. So the thing with Zach for me is I want confidence that he can go out and win games for us rather than avoiding losing games. And obviously we'll see what that looks like in the second half of the season. And, you know, if we get to the playoffs, what a must-win game looks like.
Absolutely. I mean, he'll have, from the next few weeks, he's got no excuse for there to be a bit of rust on him from the injury. Yeah. And it's literally put up or shut up, isn't it?
Yeah,
but
right.
Let's jump into the JTT Cup. So tell us all about it, mate. What's the charity, the tournament format, and all that good stuff?
So we'll start with the charity. So the reason the tournament's called the JTT Cup is because the charity is called the Joshua Tarrant Trust, so JTT. And the charity is a local charity to me. So I live not far from Cambridge in a town. And the JTT was set up by a set of parents who unfortunately lost their son to a brain tumour at 16 years old. So he was diagnosed at 7. They didn't think he'd live longer than 6 months. He managed to live for 9 years. Unfortunately, eventually succumbed to the illness. So his parents, Sean and Denise, who are two fantastic people, really inspiring. They set the Joshua Tarrant Trust up in his memory. And the charity now funds 2 posts at Addenbrooke's Hospital in Cambridge, which is obviously one of the top hospitals in the country, just to provide care and support for children with brain tumours and their families. That obviously is quite a costly 2 posts to run. So everything that they raise goes towards them 2 posts and that support. They're a brilliant family. I got to meet him in February, having obviously already run the JTT for a year. And I've become really involved in what they do as well, and seeing all the great work they do. And in terms of the tournament itself, so we're in our 2nd year, so we're halfway through our 2nd year. Last year we started quite small. We had 60 people, 60 really generous people, and all but 2 of them returned for year 2. But we managed to grow to 250 people this year. And it's a bestball tournament. This year the format is that we have 5 conferences of 50. And after week 11, so in 2 weeks' time, we'll have 15 people from each conference qualify for the playoffs, so 75. And then it's just straight head-to-head from there. So the conference winners get a bye, and then 2nd place down to 15th playing a playoff tournament, and we'll end up with a 2-person final, as most leagues do, in week 17. So that's where we're at. We've raised just short of £5,300 this year. And if you put last year's fundraising on, we've raised just over 6,000. So obviously, you know, from a personal point of view, I'm really proud of that. I'm also really appreciative of the fantasy community, mainly based in the UK, but we do have 13 people from other countries this year. You know, they're the ones that have raised that money. I just tap some numbers into a spreadsheet every week and tweet about it. So. And I'm hopeful that next year it will get even bigger. So we'll see. And you're doing pretty well. You're in a playoff spot as we speak, only just. So you've got
hanging on by a thread, I think. But it's a fantastic cause, and you do a fantastic job running the updates are regular like clockwork every Tuesday. I think you've done some on Mondays when Monday Night Football was a bit wank and we didn't really have anything to look forward to there.
Yeah.
But a hell of a lot of money raised, and the sign-ups for that is in the description of this video. So if you haven't already, go and get involved. Let's help Matt raise even more next year for a charity close to home. And it really is for an amazing cause. Like it says, though, the playoffs are approaching fast in the JTT. So talk us through from the first round of the playoffs, mate.
So how it works is, so week 12 is the start of the playoffs. It's single week head-to-head elimination. So we have divisions of 10. 3 people from each division make the playoffs. And how it works is, as I said before, we've got 5 conferences of 50. So 5 divisions of 10 in each conference. And 15 from each conference make the playoffs. So number 1 seed in each conference gets a bye. And then there's 7 first round games. So the remaining 14 play 7 head-to-head games, and then that leaves us with a last 8 in each conference in week 13, and it's just straight knockout. So week 15, is the conference finals, head-to-head, 2 people. Then in week 16, the 5 conference winners will be in a group matchup, and the highest 2 scorers from week 16 will go forward to face each other in the final in week 17. And hopefully you'll be there. I'm not going to be. I'm some 200 points behind third place in my division. So I thought I'd had quite a solid draft, but I haven't, as it turns out. And I think you're ahead of Dave by, I think, 2 points, is it? Or less than 2 points?
Yeah, less than 2, 1.6 something, I think it is. Yeah. But it was labelled, my division, the Cheshire and West Midlands division in the Central Conference, the group of death. Yeah. And I was looking around and thinking, yeah, there's some serious players in here. And I thought you stitched me right up, to be honest. But I won't hold it against you. Let's talk about Andy Campbell. He was the inaugural winner. And it's amazing, any charity tournament to come through, even to get to the later stages, you've done well. Like you say, you had 60 people last year, I think you said. And even to win a tournament of 60 people is amazing. Is he still rolling? Is he still defending his belt?
I think if I tell you that he changed his team name on the Sleeper this week to soon to be ex-champion, I think they'll tell you all you need to know. So bless Andy, he's a lovely guy. I was so pleased for him winning. I obviously got the opportunity to meet him in person for the first time at the UKFFC in July and present him with his trophy, which he didn't know was going to happen. He's a lovely bloke, and but he's probably eliminated. I think he's 8th in his division, and he's in the Northwest London division. And the 3 that are in that division in plus at the moment are some way ahead of the rest. So that's the only division where I can probably confidently call that the 3 that are in the top 3 now are the ones that are going to be in the top 3 in 2 weeks' time. But unfortunately, he's not one of them. So he's going to be giving up the title. But as I said to him this week, he will always be the first ever winner. And no one will be able to take that away from him.
No, absolutely. And it was a great moment. Like he says, he didn't expect it there in London in a very warm basement, one of the hottest days of the year. And he was chuffed to bits, and it was lovely to see. It's what it's all about as well.
Yeah.
As I said, sign-ups are open for next year. What's the target? What are you going for? Entries, and what kind of amount are you looking to raise next year?
Well, so far we've got 260 people who've expressed an interest or filled out the Google form to sign up for next year. So if you think we've got 250 this year, we've already got 260 signed up for next year. And I don't know the exact number, but there's about 85 people that are in it this year that haven't yet signed up for next year. Now, I don't expect all 85 to sign up again. I think if I'm realistic, we might get 65, 70 of them. So in my head, we've probably already got 300 plus, and that's without actually pushing it yet. And I do get quite relentless with that throughout the kind of donation window. So, but I've made a kind of pact with myself that I'm going to just have 2 donation windows that are kind of 8 weeks long, have a little bit of a break in between, and then hopefully pick up a few kind of late stragglers at the UKFFC next year. Because this year, after the UKFFC, I had loads of people interested, but we'd already set out the divisions and everything. So we've got a satellite tournament with 40 people in it, and they're all signed up for next year. I want to avoid having the satellite, but just having opportunity later in the year to get more people in. I'd love to have 400. I think if we get 400, we might raise 10,000. But whether it's 6, 7, 4,000 doesn't matter. Every penny for that charity counts. So I don't have a fundraising target in mind, but yeah, I'd love 400 people. That'd be great, and I think it's doable.
Yeah, it's definitely doable. I mean, it's growing year to year. It's bigger than this year already, and
exactly. Yeah,
we're not even there yet. And like you say, with the late entries and things like that, and you know, you can be relentless on Twitter when you want to be, but it's for a fantastic cause, and you know, no one's gonna get on your back for that. But let's move on and have a little look back at the same time. Week 9 recap. So we'll go through each skill position. I'll tell you who was the top scorer, and then we'll have a little chat. But the QB1 for this week. Now, if you watched the midway mock last week, we had Rich come on, Dynasty Island on Twitter, and we didn't really do any predictions or anything. But when we was looking back at the quarterbacks, he did mention Justin Fields, saying he had progressed the last few weeks and he don't look like stopping and things like that. He's been a QB1 the last 4 weeks, but he was the overall QB1 this week, 42.7 points in 178 rushing yards, 55 more than his passing yards.
Yeah.
But he had 3 passing touchdowns. Obviously, Cole Kmet had 2 of them, and he did get 1 on the ground. He's the QB13 the week before, which took him up to the overall QB7. From week 1 to 4, he was the QB31. So that it's a meteoric rise. He's been fantastic the last 3-4 weeks. My biggest shock at quarterback, though, is Justin Herbert. It's another poor week for him. QB18, 13 and a bit points. He was being drafted around the QB3 sort of range in all leagues, any format, doesn't matter. And he's currently the QB13 overall.
Yeah.
So I really believe it's to do with not having Keenan Allen, that bona fide wide receiver 1 that's going to get him them guaranteed completions and things like that.
I think as well.
They've
had to lean a little bit on the run game, more on the run game. Although I saw a tweet earlier that said Austin Eckler has the 3rd most receptions out of any player in the league. But yeah, you're right. Allen and also Mike Williams has been injured a few games as well, not as much as Allen has. And that's just taken away his 2 main weapons, hasn't it?
Yeah, so I think this is obviously they had the bye in week 8, but I think this is the 3rd week or like 2 and a bit weeks where Mike Williams has been out.
Yeah.
But he's very hit and miss anyway. He had 1 week where he'd be a wide receiver 1 week where forget about him. And that was literally every other week he was good, every other week he was bad until the injury. But looking at the top 12 quarterbacks from week 1 to 9, Matt, who is your biggest surprise so far?
There's only one answer to this, and you could have anyone on this show tonight other than me, and if they answer anyone other than who I'm going to answer, then they're wrong. It has to be Geno Smith, doesn't it? If we go back to prior to kind of best ball season draft, so let's talk late June, it wasn't even sure that he'd be the starter over Locke. And you look at him now, like he's carrying a Seahawks team that on paper isn't amazing. Everybody, as surprised as everyone is about the Jets and the Giants, the Seahawks are in that similar conversation. And a lot of it is down to him. He didn't set the world on fire in New York. He's kind of been a bit of a journeyman since then. He's in the outside MVP conversation, and you would never have had him in the top 12. You probably wouldn't even have him in the top 25 quarterbacks, I would imagine, at the start of the season. Legitimate shot of being in the top 5.
I mean, absolutely. He was a streaming option for 1 QB leagues. There's no way he would have been rostered at the start. I think he's up to QB7 or something like that.
Yeah, he's QB7,
over the season, which is just ridiculous. And like you say, the talks with camp battles with Drew Lock and things like that. And this guy has got experience, even if it's as a backup, and he's more than proved his worth this season.
Yeah, he's already in standard scoring. He's already got as many points after 9 weeks. He's just short of his best ever fantasy performance. So in 2013, he scored 186 points in standard scoring, and he's already on 163 after 9 weeks. So he's going to eclipse his best ever year by an absolute mile.
And he doesn't look like stopping either. But let's move on to running back. So the RB1, obviously, it was an absolute freak of nature week for Joe Mixon. 55.1 points in PPR. The RB2, just to put this into context, Ken Walker, Kenny Walker, whatever you want to bloody call him, 27.9. It's nearly half.
Yeah.
But Mixon, 211 scrimmage yards, 4 catches, 5 touchdowns. But for me, it was a freak week because he has been highly inefficient. So before this week, he only had 3 touchdowns.
Yeah.
He hasn't topped 20 points since week 1. He's only topped 15 points on 3 other occasions. Now he's up to the RB2 overall, but they've got some tough run defenses to face. So forget this freak week. Weeks 1 to 8, 3.3 yards per carry, way below average. Now he's up to 3.9. He's slightly below average, maybe. But looking at running backs that have had more than 100 snaps. So broken tackles per attempt in the first 8 weeks, 65th. No one below that broke a tackle, so he was last.
Yeah.
Yards after contact per attempt, 1.8. Not bad, but 72nd out of 80 qualifying with the 100 snaps. Yards before contact per attempt, 1.52. Slightly better, 47th out of 76. There's nothing there to suggest that this week will carry on, even maybe at a slightly less rate. Yeah. And it's been volatile, though, running backs, Matt, hasn't it? And there's been lots of surprises this year. But other than Jonathan Taylor, because, you know, he was the consensus 101 and everything, who has been your biggest letdown at running back?
I think for me, it has to be Najee Harris. If it's not Taylor. Like I said, I've got Taylor in my home league and I should be contending. And he's one of the main reasons I'm not. But let's forget about that. Najee Harris was going late first, early second round in many leagues, many formats. Obviously, depending on scoring, maybe not in Superflex. He might go slightly later, but let's call it round 1 or 2. So top 20, 24 picks overall. And you know, standard scoring, he was the RB4 last year, so he should be going that early. But standard scoring, he's RB33 this year. And I know they've had some struggles with the O-line and obviously changes at quarterback and stuff like that. But no one would have had him that low. Even if you had him maybe dropping off on production a little bit, you would never have had him at standard 33rd ranked running back halfway through the season. And when you look at PPR, he's RB27. So it has to be him. He's dropped 25 places in terms of his ranking. I'd actually have him as more of a disappointment than Taylor, I think. But he's definitely in the top 2 for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more, mate. And with Najee being a pass catcher out the backfield and he's still RB27 is ridiculous. So one thing him and Jonathan Taylor have in common, obviously, was they was drafted probably in the first round of 1 QB leagues. Mm-hmm. And they've both been rubbish. They've both had a new quarterback. And they were saying, Najee's going to be better now Ben's not there. But the other thing they have in common, and it's the most prominent one to me, they both had a ridiculous workload last year.
True, yeah.
So with Ben's noodle arm, dump off king, which has now been claimed by Matt Ryan.
Yeah.
Before obviously being benched. But Najee's workload out of the backfield and the receptions and everything has all took a drop. So now his efficiency, I really believe Jonathan Taylor will come back and will come good. Najee, I'm not so sure. Because similar with Joe Mixon, his efficiency is just not there.
Yeah, I agree. I think so. I've actually took a punt on Taylor this week in our you're in that league that we're doing the extreme redraft where we draft a new team every week between Tuesday and Thursday. So it's super flex, and I know I took Hurts and Brady in the first 2 weeks, in the first 2 rounds, sorry, and Taylor was just sitting there when it got back to me at 3.4, and I thought he can't carry on being this bad, so I'm going to take a punt on him, but we'll see. He's got a little bit of a lingering injury as well, hasn't he? So see what happens with it.
Yeah, and I think it's just purely down to his volume last year. The year before, coming off of 2 massive workhorse seasons in college as well. But let's move on to wide receiver anyway. The number 1 this week, just gone, was Devontae Adams.
Yeah.
seeing him play like how we're used to seeing him play week in, week out, 36.6 PPR points. He had a whopping start going at 10 for 10 before not catching his final 7 targets. 146 yards, 2 touchdowns. If you have Adams, he's obviously a must start. But it's so up in the air because you never know if you're going to get Derek Ferrari or Derek Fiat Punto for the Raiders. Pardon the car pun there, but I thought it worked perfectly at the time. Tyreek Hill is the wide receiver 1 overall on the season. He's the only player with 100 targets and the only player to not just top 1,000 yards, but 1,100 yards this past week. What are your thoughts on Tyreek so far? He had a lot of doubters pre-season.
Yeah, me included. And I guess it was more around who was thrown to him. You know, on paper, before the season started, and I tried to be objective in my thinking, being in the Dolphins division as a fan. But on paper, going from Mahomes to Tua is a massive downgrade, and it hasn't been. I know we're going to talk about Waddle in a minute as well, but Tyreek himself said during the off-season that there was no difference going from Mahomes to Tua, and when that quote came out, everyone kind of scoffed at it like he's crazy. But fair play to him. He's kept up a level of production. You know, he was the wide receiver 1 back in 2018. Obviously when he was at the Chiefs, but he's on point to smash that points total. He got 293 standard points back in 2018, and he's already on 173. He could break 300 points this year, definitely.
Without a doubt. I mean, he hasn't really caught that many touchdowns yet. I think it's 3 on the year. But you mentioned Waddle. So the interesting thing for me here, he's the wide receiver 5 on the year in PPR. This is. So the Dolphins have got the wide receiver 1 and the wide receiver 5. He's just past 800 yards. Did you think, and the banter in the Scott Fishbowl group, with your love for Tua, clearly, did you think he would be able to support both of them this effectively?
So so the short answer is no, but I did tweet about it on Sunday. Tua is, and again, put the rivalry aside, Tua is the player in the whole league that I was most wrong about this year. And I wasn't the only one. And I do I use it to wind up Dolphin fans? Yeah, I do. And do Dolphins fans have a good nibble on it when you tweet about Tua? Yeah, they do. But fair play to him. I tweeted about it on Sunday. I was wrong about him and his accuracy, especially on the long ball. There was loads of stuff in the off-season about the long ball. And, have there been catches that Hill and Waddle have made where they've had to come back to the ball? Yes, there are. And have some of the Dolphins' game scripts dictated the throw? They've been in a few shootouts, haven't they?
Yeah.
This week included. It was a high-scoring game. But all that aside, Tua is outperforming where most people thought he would be, and he's severely outperforming where I thought he would be. And I hate it, but I'm also, a big enough man to sit here and on YouTube and say I was wrong about him. And AFC East is a beast of a division now this year, and it'll be interesting to see what position the Jets and the Dolphins are in come week 18, because that's our final game. We could both be heading into that needing a win for playoffs. And obviously, when we did beat the Dolphins a few weeks back, Tua wasn't playing. And the Dolphins fans used that as an excuse. We put 40 points on them. That wouldn't have been much to do with Tua, to be fair, if he was on the field or not. But come New Year, when we play him in week 18, if he is fit, it'll be interesting to see how well he performs against the Jets D, which, let's face it, is definitely a top 3 D and arguably the best defense in the league.
That is the hot take of the week. The New York Jets have the best defense in the league, and that will be posted on Twitter. Do not worry about that. But yeah, Tua's been brilliant, especially since he's come over them few injury issues. The last few weeks, he's been outstanding. But tight end and I really like who you've put down here. We'll get to that in a minute. Dallas Goedert from Thursday Night Football against Houston, 24 points, 8 of 9, 100 yards on the nose and a touchdown. Kelsey was the yards and targets leader. Shock. 106 yards, 17 targets, which he caught 10 of. Finished third at tight end this week, but he's still the tight end one on the year. Obviously, he had Komet in second because he had 2 touchdowns. But tight end is such a strange position that it's touchdown dependent more than any others for fantasy. Who in the top 12 stands out for you this year, not Taysom Hill?
So, yeah, I've gone a bit left field, I think. So when you sent me the show notes with the questions that you're going to ask me, when you put the questions in about the top 12 at each position, who's the most surprising? Tight end was the only position I had to look it up to see who the top 12 was, because, you know, your Kelseys, your Andrews, your Ertzes, your Goddards are going to be in the top 5. And then I thought, who else is going to be up there? And then one name stood out to me, and it is Tyler Conklin, because, he's a Jet, I'm biased, but tight end, no one's amazing me at tight end position in fantasy this year. You've got the top 5 guys, you know, Hawkinson included now as well. You expect the top 5 to be the top 5, maybe not in the same order, but you'd name them 5 as the best 5. And then after that is a bit of a bun fight. But when you look at the 6 to 12, excluding Hill, who's at 6, Conklin is the name that stands out, and you think, that's the one name. If you think about where he was being drafted, and I mean probably not at all. Certainly in the JTT, I know it's a best ball, but it's a 26 round draft, and he went undrafted in a lot of leagues, and he was going round 24, 25, 26 in most leagues where he was drafted, and now he's the tight end 8. So, and part of that is we've had some issues at receiver. You know, Elijah Moore threw his toys out the pram, and we seem to be punishing him for it. Mims was actually pretty good this week, but has been on the periphery. Garrett Wilson's been taking all the targets recently, and when Corey Davis was healthy, it was a split between Davis and Wilson. But Conklin's doing lots of stuff, lots of good stuff in tight situations in the red zone. So he's the name I've picked out as the biggest surprise, that's for sure. Surprised me, but it's a good surprise.
And from the offset with Joe Flacco, we all know a backup quarterback loves the tight end.
Yeah.
And he had a few down weeks, but he's kind of picked that up with Zach Wilson now. And it'll be amazing to see where he ends up at the end of the season, where he finishes. But let's jump into our predictions for week 10. So we never had the segments last week. Obviously, we had the midway mock draft, but this is the Rockstar rookie predictions. So who is going to be the overall rookie number 1 in week 10, Matt?
So I've gone for Olave from the Saints, because he's playing Pittsburgh, so I do expect the Saints to rack up a fair amount of points. There's always a worry when the Saints are winning games that Kamara's going to take most of the points. But yeah, when I look through the rookies and I look through kind of the predicted points for the week, that's who I've kind of picked out. So I'll just be interested to see if they make a change back to Winston this week. But all accounts, it looks like it'll continue to be Dalton. So we'll just see what that looks like, really.
It doesn't seem to matter who Olave has under center. He's producing week in, week out, and Pittsburgh have been top 3 since week 1, letting up fantasy points against wide receivers, especially. Yeah, and there's no other wide receiver in New Orleans.
Yeah, exactly. And I think so. It would have been really easy for me to pick Ken Walker as the rookie number 1 this week. The Bucks run D has been a little bit hit and miss this season, but is generally pretty good. I actually read a story a couple of days ago that Ken Walker doesn't have a passport and might struggle to get to Germany, but I don't know if that's a thing or not. I don't know if that was just Twitter rumours. So yeah, when I look through kind of the top projected, it was Walker or Olave, or potentially Dameon Pierce, but he's questionable and he's against the Giants, whose run D is pretty good. So that's why I ended up plumping for Olave. I'll probably be terrible now, but
I was just about to ask you about Walker because I nearly picked him myself and I've seen the same story. So I was just about to ask you, do you know if he's got his passport or not? Because I'd imagine the rest of them are already there.
Yeah, I can't see anything elsewhere. I saw a couple of tweets about it, and then I thought, actually, that's a believable story. Maybe not for one of the star players, but you can imagine an American. You know, there are a lot of Americans who've never been out of the country, so it is a believable story. But I haven't seen anything more about it today. There's nothing on Sleeper about it, so I'm going to assume that it was just, waffle, and that he'll be there on Sunday in Munich.
Yeah, over 40% of Americans don't own a passport or have never owned a passport. And with it being the Seahawks, I think it's very believable that they did not do their due diligence earlier in the year as soon as they knew they were playing in Munich. But I'm sticking in the same matchup. I'm going George Pickens. He had a shit week against the Eagles in week 8, but he's coming off the bye now. He's feisty, isn't he? He'll want to bounce back from that shit show against the Eagles. New Orleans are kind of middle of the road against wide receivers. 15th most points allowed, 27.5. But that Saints D, they've struggled a bit this year. Chase Claypool's obviously out the door now. Deontay Johnson and Pat, they were getting good targets anyway. So Tomlin, he must like Pickens to bing Claypool. So for me, it's the uptick for Pickens. Kenny Pickett likes him. For me, it's a plus matchup. And that's why I've gone Pickens rather.
Yeah, fair. I like it.
We've done the rookies. Let's go on to the overall positional number ones for week 10. Kick us off for the quarterback position, mate.
So I originally wrote Mahomes versus the Jags, and then I saw Fields match up. So, Rich obviously talked about Fields last week. He was then the QB1 this week, just gone. The Dolphins' run D is not great. In fact, the Dolphins' defense as a whole is not great, but their run D especially is not great. And like you said, he had 170 odd rushing yards and 120 passing, which is just insane. But I like his matchup this week against the Lions. I think it's got the potential, like every Lions game this season, it's got the potential to be a bit of a shootout. If he's anything upwards of 100 yards rushing and it's a bit of a shootout and he plays mistake-free, he could easily put up another 40 points like he did this week. So, and most quarterbacks have scored well against the Lions this year, bless them. So that's why I went for him to repeat as he did this week.
Most quarterbacks, except for Aaron Rodgers, he can get in the bin. Justin Fields don't look like stopping, especially on the ground. But you mentioned Mahomes. That's who I'm going for against the Jags. He was ridiculous last week. I think it was over 500 scrimmage yards in the end.
Yeah.
It's at Arrowhead. The Jags ranked 12th worst against a quarterback, letting up average 17.8 points. If Trev turns up this week and he turns it into a shootout, which could be possible, Mahomes will blow up again, just like last week.
Yeah. I think so. The interesting thing about Mahomes, I read it. So Tom Strachan was tweeting about it earlier in the week. Like, he threw for over 400 yards, but only one touchdown, which is just insane. And Tom done a breakdown of like all the times that's happened, and it's very rare. So I just feel like he's easily going to put 400 up again, but I just feel like he won't only throw for one touchdown again. It's almost it'll be like a bit of a personal mission for him. I think that's a good pick, to be fair.
And I've gone super chalky at running back. If you thought Mahomes was chalk, this is even worse. Saquon at home to Houston, fresh off the bye. The Giants go through Saquon. There's no one else there. Houston are 32nd out of 32 for fantasy points against running backs. He's still the RB6 in PPR, even after the bye week.
Yeah,
nearly 20 points per game. There's nothing more to be said there. He's going to go off regardless, isn't he?
Yeah, and I looked at him, and obviously we'll talk about who I picked in a minute. But I think that's a great pick. He's obviously doing an amazing job, and everything the Giants do is through him, as you said. And the Texans D is just horrendous. So there you go. Simple as
but
that.
It is a week. I think it is a week for running backs because there was loads of people jumping out on me, including yours. Tell us.
So You say you went chalky. I feel like I've gone chalky as well. So I've gone for CMC. They're against the Chargers. The Chargers are banged up. He's coming off a bye as well. He's had an extra. He'll have had an extra 2 weeks to learn the playbook. There was all this talk of, when he was flying from Carolina to San Francisco, he was in the playbook and all that. And they obviously used him quite a lot in their first game against the Rams, wasn't it? Was it against the Rams? Yeah. He put up 35 points against the Rams, who have a pretty good D against the run. The Chargers don't, so I could see him putting up that again. He was RB2 before the bye, and that was off just learning the playbook in a flight. So, yeah, I fancy him to go off this week, that's for sure.
My Warrior Bowl resurgence runs through my trade for Travis Etienne and Christian McCaffrey. So let's hope that losing record flips over this week and become 0.500 at least. But
yeah,
wide receivers now. Hit us. Just go straight into it. Who you got at wide receiver?
So I've got AJ Brown, and I originally had, when I was thinking about the quarterback picks before I went Fields, I was only looking at Hurts and Mahomes for this week. So they've got a good matchup against the Commanders. When thing about AJ Brown is when they face a top 8 defense against the throw, he's still scoring 13, 14, 15 points. So when they played the Cowboys and the Texans, but if you look at all the matchups he's had against some of the worse pass defense, like Detroit, like Washington the first time round, he's scoring upwards of 20 points, and he's obviously had the 36 points against the Steelers a couple of weeks ago. So I just feel like he's the play this week. The Eagles don't show any signs of slowing down. Their schedule is pretty favourable. I think he could end up. I don't think he's going to push Tyreek as the overall wide receiver one, but he's going to be in the top 3, I think, by come the end of the season, as long as he stays injury free. So that's what I've gone for this week.
Yeah, absolutely. I mentioned it with Rich last week. He could be the bargain of drafts this season. If he keeps hot like that, like you say, with a safe floor, even against good defenses, he's getting 14, 15 points.
Yeah.
And I've picked him the last 2 weeks, not this week, the 2 before, in the redraft extreme that you was on about, in the second round.
Yeah.
But I thought I'd switch it up a little bit this week. And maybe it wasn't such a good idea. I should have stuck with my game plan of Jefferson and AJ Brown.
He's been in the top 12 wide receivers every week in the last 3 games that he's played. They did have a bye in week 7. And he was the wide receiver 1 in week 8 overall. So, yeah, he's going to be top 5, definitely. So, definitely a pump for number 1.
Absolutely. Now, I'm going... AJ Brown might seem safe-ish. I'm going way outside the box with my wide receiver pick. I'm going to go for a stack. So I'll pick Mahomes. I'm going for Juju.
Nice.
It's wild, but not without context. So in week 9, last week, week 9, he was the wide receiver 8. He had 12 targets, 80-odd yards, no scores, whatever. By week 8, obviously, week 7, he was the wide receiver 4. 8 targets, 100+ yards, touchdown. Week 6, wide receiver 7, 5 from 5, 100+ and a touchdown. Now, week 5, he was rubbish, but he still had 8 targets. So the volume with Patrick Mahomes, like you said, who only threw for 1 touchdown last week with an insane amount of yards, the volume is there. He's the clear number 2 behind Kelsey. He had 12 targets last week. Kelsey had 17.
Yeah.
Mahomes ain't going to throw the ball 60+ times every week or whatever, but that is still an insane amount of targets. All it takes is Kelsey not to catch a touchdown or not be the end zone target or something like that. He's looking at Juju next.
Yeah.
The running backs are all rubbish.
Yeah.
And that's where I'm going. It could be this week. It could be. It'll probably be the week after, but it could be this week.
I don't think that's a bad shout, to be fair, with the volume that he's seen. And I think, again, the game script, wasn't it? So the Chiefs' last game was closer than expected against the Titans. So he threw more. He threw over 60 times. if they jump out to a quick lead against the Jags, he's not going to throw it 60 times. So then it's a CEH or whoever just running it into the ground. But yeah, I don't think that's an outside the box shout, but it's not a bad shout, I think.
Like I says with when I was speaking about Mahomes, if Trevor Lawrence turns up with the weapons he has with Etienne, Christian Kirk, Evan Engram, it could turn into a shootout. And if it does, that's when Juju has that wide receiver one potential for me.
Agreed, yeah.
But tight end, I was buzzing after the trade anyway. I'm going TJ Hawkinson. I think it's about my third time touting him this year, and it's been every week when he's been rubbish. Now, the Vikings, this week for the Vikings, for me, it is, we're 7-1, obviously, but it's time to like step up, shit or get off the toilet. Do you know what I mean? It's Buffalo. We're at Buffalo. Hawkinson had a great debut, 9 from 9 for 70 yards. You can't ask for more than that in 2 days. And to me, it really seemed like he was Kirk Cousins' safety blanket. Now, in a game against that Buffalo defense, who are very good against every position, they're very good against tight ends. But if he's the safety blanket for Cousins in that game that can help us move the chains and things like that, he's going to be fantasy relevant every game here on out, you'd think. Yeah. Like I said, this will probably bite me in the arse. But if he gets 9 targets or similar amount of yards with a touchdown, that's a tight end one.
Exactly. And the interesting factor will be whether it's Allen or Case Keenum, won't it? Because you've got to think that the Bills are still the favourites on paper if Allen plays. They are. They'll be the favourites every week against whoever they play. But all of a sudden, if it's Keenum playing, you've got to fancy your chances. And then it's a case of what does the game script look like for Hawkinson. But yeah, he's tight end 5 anyway, isn't he? Obviously, the Lions receiving core are scoring pretty well this year in fantasy because they're having to throw the ball so much. And Goff's being okay. It's not been amazing. Now he's come across to you. Yeah, now he's come across to you guys. He should cement that position in the top 5 and perhaps even go into the top 3. But I think that's a good shout, to be fair.
I mean, you can ask any New Orleans Saints fan, Case Keenum to Stephon Diggs is pure fire, mate. Like, to be honest, you don't want to come on the wrong end of it like they did.
Any Saints fan watch this, they're going to have a little cry now. Definitely going to unsubscribe after you mention that.
If one of the 12 subscribers is a Saints fan, I'm not sorry, to be honest. I'm not. But anyway, who's your tight end for week 10, mate?
Super chalky. I looked at the matchups and I went Kelsey straight away. For similar reasons to you. You picked Mahomes and you picked Juju. They've got a great matchup through the air. Expect them to score a lot of points. There's nothing more to say. He is the tight end one, and he's got a great chance to be it this week. So that's all I need to say about Kelsey, really.
Yeah, whenever Travis Kelce's mentioned, you can literally just say Travis Kelce. Let's move on.
Yeah.
And if we move on, that is the end of this show. But thank you for coming on, Matt. It's been a pleasure, and I've had a good time, mate.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I really appreciate you asking me on, and obviously getting to chat and piece. Obviously, give the a bit of play. That was always an added bonus. So yeah, thank you. And good luck to you for the next 2 weeks now, and getting out of the group of death.
Hopefully, Dave is right up my bottom. And 2023 signups are open. The link is in the description of this video. But that is it for this week. So we'll be back same sort of time next week for a bit of a recap and all the usual segments. You can follow Matt on Twitter if you want to tell him, mate.
Yep. So my personal handle is it's on the screen. So it's at @Q84_FF. And the JTT Cup handle is at JTT Cup. Very simple. And as you say, so it's in the description of the video, and also the sign-up form is on the JTT Cup accounts pinned tweet as well. It's a really simple form. Google form takes 30 seconds to fill out, and then we'll be in contact after Christmas once we start looking at donations and stuff like that.
yeah, it's a great tournament. It's a lot of fun. The league chats, I imagine they're all pretty much the same. Ours was fantastic. And yeah, come and sign up and hopefully come in the group of death with us next year. But until next week, have a great weekend. I hope you win all your fantasy matchups unless you play me. Good night.
Thanks, man.